The passage we'll be reading this morning, verses 1 through 15. So in Numbers chapter 32, we'll read responsively verses 1 through 15 all together on verse 1, please, and then every other verse with me down to verse number 15 here out of Numbers chapter 32. Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of cattle. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that, behold, the place was a place for cattle. The children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spake unto Moses and to Eleazar the priest, and unto the princes of the congregation, saying, Ataroth and Dibon and Jazer and Nimrah and Heshbon and Elealeh and Shebam and Nebo and Beon, even the country which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel, is a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle. Wherefore, said they, if we have found grace in thy sight, let this land be given unto thy servants for a possession, and bring us not over Jordan. And Moses said unto the children of Gad and to the children of Reuben, shall your brethren go to war, and shall ye sit here? And wherefore discourage ye the heart of the children of Israel from going over into the land which the Lord hath given them? Thus did your fathers when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. For when they went up unto the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the heart of the children of Israel, that they should not go into the land which the Lord had given them. And the Lord's anger was kindled the same time, and he sware, saying, surely none of the men that came up out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land which I swear unto Abram, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, because they have not wholly followed me, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. And the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was consumed. And behold, ye are risen up in your father's stead, an increase of sinful men, to augment yet the fierce anger of the Lord toward Israel. For if ye turn away from after him, he will yet again leave them in the wilderness, and ye shall destroy all this people. Thank you very much. You may be.
Our Heavenly Father, I am just not real sure how I'm going to get this truth across today, but if you'll help me, that's all I need. And I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Someone said a long time ago, not critically, but they said of me, said, I know why people don't like your preaching. What a way to start a conversation. That's as bad as somebody saying, I heard what they said about you. And I'm, oh, thank you very much. Or as one man said to me one time, I used to think all kinds of things about you that were bad. He never told me what they were. But says, I know why people don't like your preaching. Well, I immediately could think of a bunch of reasons why people wouldn't like my preaching. But the one reason that they gave, and again, it was not a critical thing, it was as your preaching demands a decision. And as I thought about that, that's very, very true. We do our best here not to preach an ABC, 1, 2, 3, do this, do that, and go home. We try not to do that. And so today I want to provoke you, and I want you to listen very, very carefully. The Bible asks an incredible question here, which is the title to today's message, which is simply this: shall ye sit here? Shall ye sit here? The Gadites and the Reubenites wanted to be excused from going into the promised land. Just let us stay here. There's plenty of grass. We got lots of cows. We have plenty of room to herd our cows. Just let us stay here instead of going on over into the land of promise that God had given to God's people. We find here that the Gadites and the Reubenites were a carnal, worldly, and halfway kind of people. And they wanted to stay on the borderline, is where they wanted to stay. And they wanted to stay there and simply graze their cattle because there was lots of grass where they were standing. They said, this is good graze land. But I want to say this, it may have been good graze land, but it was not God's promised land. It was not what God had promised to his people. And so Lester Roloff used to sing this song. He'd sing, "It's a battlefield, brother, not a recreation room. It's a fight and not a game. So run if you want to, run if you will, but I've come here to stay." John Rice said, and I quote, "Everybody wants to be in the army of the Lord, but everybody wants to be in the quartermaster corps." See, what's the quartermaster corps? Those are the people that take care of the men's quarters. Officers responsible only for the food, the clothing, and the equipment, and the equipping of the troops. You see, there are borderline believers in every church in America. And today we're going to take not an exposition of a passage, but we're going to apply a principle that is found in this particular place in light of today's modern Christianity, especially in light of what has happened in the last year, plus a little bit more. You see, I said a moment ago, there are borderline believers in every church in America. From the beginning of this pandemic or plandemic or dim panic or whatever you want to call it, these borderline backsliders have manifested themselves and literally revealed their true colors. According to the Wall Street Journal, in a recent article entitled "Coronavirus Relief Often Pays Workers More Than Work," when combined with state benefits, weekly government payouts create incentives that employers say complicate efforts to reopen their businesses. Just this past week, I experienced this. I went into a particular business, and there were only a couple of people that were there, and they said, "We're shorthanded." I said, "Really? What has happened?" And I said, "Is this government paying people more to stay home and not work and receive unemployment than to have them come in?" And they said, "Yeah, that's a good part of it." And they started naming off the names of their employees and said that there were 2 employees that had gone on to greener pastures, which is fine. They were walking up the ladder of their business, and that was a good thing. And they did not quit their job. But there were other employees that had decided to stay home, collect unemployment, and get paid more than they were getting paid by that particular business. And I said, that is so sad. And the workers that were standing in front of me on the other side of this counter, where they were seated and standing, they just shook their heads. They were so sad. And they were backed up. And I always ask when I go into a business, I will say, "Well, how's business today?" And they'll tell me slow or fast. And if they tell me that business has been good, I'll say, "Well, that's job security. They need you." But when I asked there, they said they were overwhelmed and did not have enough workers because they were staying home getting paid by the U.S. government. And yet there's plenty of jobs to be had. I even listened on the news the other day, and this is not a political sermon. This is going to be one that's applicable to the local church. But I was listening on the news just the other day, and they said there's construction jobs by the hundreds and thousands around this country that are available right now, but construction workers want to stay home, draw unemployment, and get money from the government. It's an incentive not to work. Well, the Reubenites and the Gadites, they had incentive to stay on the other side of Jordan, not go into the promised land because they had all the grass that their cows needed. They said, "Let us stay here. There's plenty for us." But I want to say this. It's not just the secular workforce. We have many today, and some of you listening online to me right now, don't tune me out. Don't turn me off. As I heard one of my friends on the radio say this week, he said, "Don't turn off your radio. Don't turn it off." In fact, I heard him say that just this morning as I was driving down the pass, because he was getting ready to preach something that probably thought nobody was going to want to hear. He said, "Don't turn off your radio. Don't tune me out yet. I have the rapt attention of folks that are here in this auditorium, but I want you to listen to me as well." You see, it's not just the secular workforce. This pandemic, this plandemic, this dim panic, whatever you'd like to call it, has caused a lot of damage in churches around this country. We have many today who, because of the pandemic, no longer have a desire to get back to the ministries to which they were once involved. I mean, they've been off for a year. They don't want to go back to what they were doing. I've named off a few here that I'm personally acquainted with as far as kind of ministry that I'm involved in: pastoring, preaching, teaching Sunday school, nursery and children's church workers, bus ministry, soul winning, volunteering, and you name it. They've been off for a year or better and have no desire to go back to the ministry that they had once before because they have settled into a different schedule. Listen, Timberline has never closed. Oh, sure, we cut back on a couple of our ministries for safety's sake, but we're going to get right back into it. And we need to be ready for that. We don't need to be Gadites and we don't need to be Reubenites. We need to be ready to get back into that ministry. But yet there are churches all around this country where their workers have gotten lazy, got involved in other things, got involved in other work, and all the rest of it, and have no desire to go back to their ministries in which God had put them. And I find that to be a very sad thing. Like Gad and like Reuben, they beg simply to be excused. The grass is green where we are. Why should we change? Sad. So there's a number of applications. I have no idea how short this is going to be, but it's not going to be one of my longest messages that I've ever preached. And some of you just said amen, and that's okay. Nobody in this room. But what I'm saying is this. Number one, I want you to notice the question. In verse 6 of Numbers 32, it says, "And Moses said unto the children of Gad and to the children of Reuben, Shall your brethren go to war, and shall ye sit here?" On the other side of Jordan, there were going to be enemies. Nobody in their camp, of course, and nobody where they were sitting. But on the other side, it was going to take some work, and there was going to be a battle. And he simply asked the question, shall your brethren go on across Jordan and get into a war in the land of promise? And you just sit here? The question was good. I wrote down 4 things about that. Things is not a good word to use in a sermon, but I'm using it today. 4 things. Number 1, it was a straightforward question that Moses got right to the point. He said, you're going to sit here? Your brethren's going to war. When you think about that, he was stating a fact. Now, maybe the Gadites and the Reubenites knew that there was going to be a war. I'm sure that they did, because when the 12 men went to spy out Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. And when they came back and 2 of them said, it's everything God promised, and 10 of them said, there's giants in there, they're going to eat us like bread, we're grasshoppers in their sight, they knew there was going to be a battle. Maybe they were afraid to do it. Maybe they just didn't want to get involved. I don't know. But I find the second truth about this, or second thing about this, is that it was a rebuking question and very convicting. See, what do you mean? For him to look at them and say, your brethren are going to war and you're going to sit here and feed cows. There's milk and honey on the other side of Jordan. There's God's blessing, everything that you could possibly want, everything in that land of promise. And you're willing to give up God's best so you can feed your cows? A convicting. Now, were they all convicted? Obviously not. A third thing about it was this. It was a personal question. Why? Because it boiled down to the individual. The individual. Individuals are who serve the Lord. Groups don't. Individuals do. Because groups are made up of individuals. Everybody's supposed to do their part. Everybody's supposed to pull their weight. Everybody's supposed to do what they're supposed to do and not make any big deal out of it. It's not a all of us. It's an individual thing. We all got to be there. Many, many years ago, when I lived in Minnesota, Dr. Ron Hamilton came as Patch the Pirate to our church there, and he trained the children in a choir song, and they had to play little bells, and they would stand in front of them with a chart, and they had all these different colors for the different notes that they were supposed to hit, and we would play a song on our bells. They put me in that choir. I was standing in the back, in the middle. I was taller than all the children that were there, and I had a little bell. I had one note. And it was at the end. They gave me one note to play. And so they're pointing at all the different colors. Ding, 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 ding. They're all playing their tunes and all the rest of it. It got to my note, and I got to ring my bell. One of the lessons that was taught there was every note in that piece of music was important. And every bell. And you just remove one bell, and you don't have a complete piece of music. And today in churches, I think about how many pastors are now begging for their people to come back to ministry and to come back into work in their ministry and not be complaining about their ministry because they've had a year off and they've not had to do their ministry. They've not had to drive a bus. They've not had to drive a van. They've not had to pull people in. They've not had to go door to door. They've not had to do any of those things. Why? For a year. They need to get back to it. It was a personal question because it boiled down to the individual. As I was thinking just this week, I walked through the church and there was a piece of trash laying, not trash, just a piece of paper laying on the floor. And I leaned down and picked it up. And I thought to myself, there are no little jobs in ministry. None whatsoever. There are no little jobs. This morning, I almost walked past a piece of paper that was laying outside the men's restroom. No, it was not a piece of toilet tissue. But it was a small piece of paper, and I stepped over the top of it and started up the stairs, and I stopped, and I said to myself, nope, somebody's going to be here today, and they're going to see that on the floor. And I went back down the stair, and I picked it up, and I brought it, and I put it in the trash can. Say, why did you do that? Because there are no little jobs in the Lord's work. Everything's big. Doesn't matter what it is. Everything is big. I went out on Wednesday night, something that's been bothering me for a long time that I have just refused to take care of. And it's not because I wanted somebody else to take care of it. It's just me. Call it a lazy bone. I don't know what you want to call it. But on Wednesday night, right outside here, as you know, our parking lots are covered with rock and or dirt or mud or whatever, depending on the rain season. And in the wintertime, I would go out there with our beautiful big snow blower that we have here at the church, and I'd fire that thing up, and I'd take off down the sidewalk. And when I got to the entrance to our parking lots, I would hear ching, kung, kung, rocks flying all over the place, and because they were underneath the snow. Because our parking lot, you drive in, you drive out, trash truck comes in, goes out, and the rocks go onto the lip of our driveway. And so on Wednesday night, I came back into the church here. I went in and got our broom and did something that I've been refusing to do. And I went out and cleaned off the sidewalk in front of our driveways. See, well, Pastor, are you telling us how wonderful you are? Yes, I'm glad you recognize that. I want everyone to know what a servant I am and how I'm willing to get down and remove rocks from our driveway entrances. I want you to know how wonderful I am. I'm great, but no one knows it. No one knows it so far. Someday they'll realize how wonderful I are. They'll look at me, they'll point at me, and then they'll shout, hooray! I'm great, but no one knows it. But they will someday. No, I went out there because I'm tired of running over rocks and walking on them. I got a broom and I cleaned it up, and I thought, now our driveway looks better. Our driveway looks better. And while I had my broom, I walked up and I swept off the sidewalk because the rains had washed stuff down onto the sidewalk. And then I looked at our steps, and I got the broom and I cleaned off our steps. You say, you want somebody to pat you on the back? I already told you I do. But no, I don't want that. But you know what? We may be a small church located in an out-of-the-way, know-nothing, do-nothing town. And people may look at us as chopped liver rather than God's place. But I'm here to tell you what, this is God's place. And I came back inside and I put that broom up and I put my suit coat on and got ready for church on Wednesday night. And we had a good service here. To see, did anybody notice the rocks in the sidewalks? No. I did. And I'm saying that because there are no small jobs. None. Everything is big in the Lord's work. And God's people need to get back to it, rather than treating it like, well, I've had a vacation for a year. I said there were 4 things that I wanted to give you on that. Number 4 was simply this. It was a revealing question because it revealed their selfishness, fear, and lethargy that had settled into their lives. They got comfortable where they were. We got plenty of grass. We got plenty of cows. 1 + 1 = 2. Why not? And rather than go to work and do as they should, they decided to take it easy. I think that's a shame. It should have never happened. But sadly, it's happening in our churches in America today. And it shouldn't be. I was speaking with someone, it was just this last week. Must have been, I don't know, I've slept since then. But we were talking about the length of time that we've been here in this church, the Penns and us, and of course Joanna, when she was alive, was here for those 21 years. And Brother Penn and Mrs. Penn have been here 30 years in August, or 31 years in August, and we've been here 31 years next month. And we were talking about a calling to a place. And I thought to myself, that's true. It's easy to lose your burden when things are going south. But it's hard to get rid of your calling when you've got a calling on your life. And I don't even remember who I was talking with, and I should remember this, but I'm not remembering who I was talking with. But it was about that very thing. The time invested because it's the Lord's work. And that's why during this last year and so many months, during this pandemic, this dim panic, this is why we've not quit. That's why we've not gone in another direction. You look at the financial record in this church, and the Lord always takes care of the needs. You look at the spirit of the services here, and God always takes care of that. What a marvelous and a wonderful thing that actually is. And I praise the Lord for that. So, I said, first of all, notice the question. Secondly, I want you to notice the sin. Look at verse 7. And wherefore discourage ye the heart of the children of Israel from going over into the land which the Lord hath given them. And then I want you to look down at 32 and verse 9. It says, for when they went up into the valley of Escol, they saw the land, and they discouraged the heart of the... That word is used twice here. Discouraged. Why are you willing to discourage the people? Now, I'm a study bug now, and I looked up the word discourage all over again, and it has so many wonderful applications, but the one that applies here is the one that is most significant for this message today. It's a strong word, and here's what it means. It means to refuse. That's interesting. It means to forbid, which is interesting. It means to dissuade or neutralize. Interesting word. Or to break or disallow or make of none effect, and to neutralize seem to be the exact right application in this passage. By what they chose, they neutralized the hearts of many. Just neutralized them. Turned people off. Well, nobody else is doing it. Nobody else is going. I'm busy. I have other things to do. Neutralize. Oh, sure, it means to refuse, forbid, dissuade, and all the rest of it, to break and to disallow and to make of none effect. All those things apply, they really do. But in my opinion, the single meaning in this context was that they neutralized everybody around them, except for two men. They neutralized them, made them neutral. And I'm wondering today how many of God's servants, are you listening? I'm wondering how many of God's servants today are now neutral over the things they were once fervent for. And I realize I just ended a sentence in a preposition, but it fits. I wonder how many people have become neutral because they have become of none effect over the last year. I mean, think about it. When was the last time a Sunday school class was called on? Sunday school classes were canceled. Bus ministry, bus calls. Think about that. All these different things. People have become so neutral. And the Bible says the sin that they did was that they discouraged those around them. Discouraged them. I don't think Christians realize that their actions can be a discouragement to people around them. They don't realize. They don't realize how important their presence is in a service. Why? Because, Brother Penn, I'm going to go back a lot of years. I'm going to go back 30 years. I remember when we first became pastor of this church back in 1990. And there was a dear old saint of God who had been a member for probably the history of the church. And when you get a new guy in, not all the old guys stay around, okay? It's just a natural parting of the ways. It's just one of those things. I've illustrated this time and again, and you've always chuckled, but it broke my heart. And when she walked in, she started in the back door. She put her hand on her hip, just like this, and looked at the pews and said, "Where is everybody? Where is everybody?" And it became a discouragement. Why? Why did she say that? Of all things, why did she say that? Where is everybody? Well, I'm saying, hey, lady, where's all the people you invited to come to church today? Where are all your visitors? Where are all your converts? Where are all your people that need to be baptized? I didn't say anything to her. I just watched her as she marched down the aisle. And I think it was later than that, Brother Pan. I believe it was a few years later. It wasn't up in Woodland Park. It might have been, I don't know where it was. Doesn't matter. It happened. It's in the past. Where is everybody? And I thought to myself, what a sad thing to say in front of a lot of people. And you know, you can discourage people by your words and by your actions, by your lack of activity, by your lack of participation. And I said, well, never mind what I said recently. Number 3. And lastly, I want you to notice the consequences. Or I should say, notice the consequence. Look at verse 23. It says, "But if ye will not do so, behold, ye have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out." Be sure your sin will find you out. With the shirking of any responsibility, there are many unintended consequences. Why? Because of unseen circumstances. In other words, we don't know what our actions or reactions or responses are going to do. We don't have an idea of what's going on. I didn't intend for that to happen. I didn't want to discourage anybody. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't want to hurt the church. I didn't want to hurt the pastor. I didn't want to hurt my friend. Didn't want to hurt the people. Didn't want to hurt anybody. No, but there are unintended consequences because of those unforeseen circumstances that come. For example, the sin will find you out in a lack of joy because without responsibility, life is empty. People get lazy. During the pandemic, the dim panic, there were people that wanted to work and couldn't. And now there are people that don't want to work and they're needed. During this time, so many discouraging things, if you've ever read of what's going on in our mental hospitals and what's going on with suicides and all these different things that are all piled up on top of everything. Because, listen, a lack of responsibility, it's an amazing thing. There's no joy in a person's life when they don't have anything to do. And sadly, in our churches today, because they did not have the same responsibilities before, they found other things to do. And now they got to add serving the Lord back into their schedule. That's going to be difficult for some folks. Secondly, the sin will find you out in a loss of peace in your life. I will say this about myself and my wife, is that we have not stopped things, and we've not become discouraged, and we've not lost our joy or anything else. We've not lost our peace. Just stay busy. I mean, Sunday morning, you got to make the donuts. You got to get up and go to church. I mean, that just doesn't change. Alarm goes off at the same time that it always does. Before we ever got here, the former pastor said to me, as we were talking on the phone, might have been in April or May, he said, "Well, tell me, what time do you get up in the morning?" I said, "Every morning my alarm goes off at 6 o'clock. Every morning." And he gulped on the phone. He said, 6 o'clock, you get up that early? And I thought, what time do you get up? What I'm saying is that hasn't changed just because there's been a pandemic, a dim panic, a pandemic. That schedule remains the same. On Saturday, it goes off at 7. On Sunday through Friday, it goes off at 6. That's my schedule. And that simply does not change. You say, have you ever tried to sleep in? Yeah, but my internal alarm clock does not allow me to sleep in. But that's just the way it is. But you know what? We've not stopped serving the Lord. There's still that peace in our hearts. And thirdly, was this, is the sin will find you out at the judgment seat of Christ. Why? Because God has given to you responsibility. And you can't shirk those responsibilities just because there's a pandemic, because there's a plandemic, because there's a dim panic or anything else. You have to keep it up. Why? Because one of these days, every one of us are going to stand before the Lord. This is a calling. This is not a burden. This is a calling in our lives that God has given to us. And we got to make sure we get back to it and do what we're supposed to do. It says, but if ye will not do so, if you don't go over, if you don't go into the promised land, if you don't fulfill what you're supposed to do, if you don't fulfill God's plan for your life, he said this to them, if you will not do this, behold, you have sinned against the Lord. And God forbid that any of us should be guilty of sinning against the Lord with our responsibilities that God has given to us. And I know in my own church family, listen, we need this. And I know that in many of you that are listening online this morning, you need it as well. Don't shirk your responsibilities just because there was a plandemic that came on. Understand what I'm saying? You know, I've said this often. And again, I'm referring to myself so that you can know how wonderful I am. But all through this entire last year, every person that I met when I was out, if it was appropriate, I said howdy, howdy to them. I've been shirked, I've been avoided, and all the rest of it. People scared to death they're going to get a bug because I might have the COVID on me or whatever it might be. And I may walk into the post office, walk into City Market, go into Walmart, go wherever I go. And if I see people and I say howdy, howdy to them, how many people have turned away and not even looked at you because they're afraid they're going to get the COVID? I walked into a place one time, and in fact, I walked in for lunch. Where was it at? Panda Express. And by the way, they have got a tremendous bowl now that you need to get. That's all I can say. It was only $9 or $8, whatever it was. But I walked in there, and they were talking to the plexiglass. They were talking to me, and I said, I'm sorry, sir. I can't understand a thing you're saying. I said, I'm an old man and I'm almost deaf. And I said, do you have COVID? He said, no. And I said, I don't either. Now, listen, let me tell you. And we both laughed about it, of all things. Well, see, why did you do that? Because I'm a Christian. I'm not going to quit my Christianity because of something that's going around. Now, knock on wood, we've never been affected by it here, but you've been affected, other people around you have been affected. And all I'm saying is this, and I said this a long time ago at the very beginning of this, don't stop being Christian just because there is a pandemic in our country right now. Dr. Hiles taught us a long time ago, be nice to everybody because everybody's having a tough time. And you know what? When people don't talk to you and people won't acknowledge you and they won't look at you, that can be discouraging after a while because no man is an island unto himself. We really are social creatures. So I want to bring this down to a conclusion because I don't want anybody in my church family just to sit here while there's a battle going on. I mean, starting Sunday school back up, getting our nursery going, getting people here, calling on absentees, all the rest of it needs to be taken care of. Some of you radscallions out there listening to me online, you've quit too. And shall you sit here while your brethren go to war? What I'm saying, we can't shirk our calling. Perhaps this is one of the most vivid stories in the entire Bible that actually illustrates the human condition in Christianity right now. When many are doing rightly, there are always some Gadites and Reubenites who want to be excused from going forward. They, like them, are carnal, worldly, and halfway kind of people. They, like them, want to stay on the borderline and graze their cattle. Oh, sure, we've all got responsibilities beyond our church responsibilities. All of us do. But we don't shirk the calling. There are borderline believers in every church in America from the beginning of this pandemic, this plandemic, this dim panic. These borderline backsliders have manifested themselves and revealed their absolute true colors. And like Gad and like Reuben, they begged to be excused. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthian believers that the Old Testament stories were given to us as examples so we can learn from it. If we can't learn from the Reubenites and the Gadites about fulfilling God's will, then I guess we're blind. And so we look at that today. So I want to ask you a question. Are you a worker or are you a shirker? Are you one who's gotten comfortable grazing your cows on this side of the Jordan? Are you ready to go and claim what God has for you on the other side? What we need to do is keep going forward. Say, Pastor, have you got an issue today that you're trying to deal with? No. Just believe this was the time to bring this message. One person a long time ago, now in heaven, God bless her heart, she was secretary up in Wyoming. And she passed away a number of years ago. And every week she got our sermon outlines. Every week got our sermon outlines. And she wrote me one time and she said, I've been reading your sermon outlines. Have you got some problems in your church? And I wrote back and I said, absolutely not. I said, that's just the next one in line. I said, I'm not one of those that tries to find a sore spot and dig on it. I don't do that. But the truth of the matter is, right now, I think this is time for us to be thinking seriously about what's on the other side of Jordan with the responsibilities that God has given to each and every one of us. And I think it's important. Would you stand with me, please?